Hello, friends, and welcome to a special series of the Doing What Matters podcast. I'm your co-host, Erica Vinson, and I'm thrilled to have you join us. While Teresa is on sabbatical until January of 2025, we have created a series of some of the best episodes from the past few years. These episodes are some of our favorite conversations, exploring the themes of life, business, and the essential elements that truly matter as we journey through life together. Enjoy these next few weeks, and Teresa and I will be back with you with new great episodes and guests in the new year. Let's dive into the best of the Doing What Matters podcast.
Welcome back, everyone, to the Doing What Matters podcast. I am your host, Teresa McCloy, and we love gathering around conversations about really leaning in and doing what matters. On the podcast, I usually either talk to someone that's made significant changes in their life, or I share a story about what has helped me to make those changes. Today, we are going to talk about a tool we use here at the Real Life Process, but a tool I've used personally for years, and that is the Enneagram. I want to dive back into this. We did several episodes a month or two back, re-exploring the Enneagram, but it is a question I get asked so many times when I'm out speaking, and a tool that recently I've been doing several in-person workshops around. And so I have done some work in reframing some statements that come from the Enneagram. And I really think it's about changing some of the narrative. So that's what we're going to dive into today. If you're not familiar with the tool of the Enneagram, go back and listen to some of my early podcast episodes or some recent work that I've done here on the podcast. The Enneagram helps you to discover these three centers of intelligence: the head, the heart, and the gut or the body. And within those three centers, we usually operate in our operating system pretty heavily out of one of those centers. But what's interesting is we have a narrative. We have the crazy tapes that are playing in our head out of all three centers. And so today on this podcast, I'd like to talk about those centers. What are those narratives, those crazy tapes, and how might we shift them into something more positive, more in a true or self, the true self side of who we are. Many times I talk about how are you on your best day and how are you on your worst day, or we flip in and out of that throughout the day. How can we change that thinking behavior, change that mindset into a growth mindset? I want to explore changing the narrative today from these three centers. And I'm going to talk really broad today. We could dive into each of the 9 types that are around the Enneagram circle. I'm really just going to talk about the 3 centers. And I just want you to listen in today of what are you telling yourself and how would you like that to shift into a growth mindset? Not just saying, well, that's just the way I am. That's the way I think. That's always the way I feel. I don't know. I always react that way. How could we change that language? So I'm going to start this conversation at the top of the circle with what we call the body centers or the gut centers. If you've explored the Enneagram a little bit, you know that these are the 9s, the 8s, the 1s. Those are the types that sit in this body center. Let's explore these 3 types. Many times they're saying things like, I've had enough. They all do it differently. But what if they could shift that statement from I've had enough to something like, I want to explore this differently. What might be possible in this situation? Staying open-handed, open-hearted, open mind, instead of shutting that down with I've had enough. Each of these might do it differently. For example, a healthy 8, if you resonate with the 8 or you connect to it in the 8-2-5 harmony, instead of saying I've had enough, maybe it's this place of let's discuss this openly and find a solution together. Pulling in that heart space, pulling in the exploration of the wisdom. Instead of, I've had enough, I'm done, which is on the unhealthy side, the adaptive side. How could you open it up to say, let's discuss this openly and work together to find a solution? Or for the type 9s, when a 9 is healthy, they're receptive and easygoing and supportive. But when they get to that place where they're done and they don't want to do the conflict to come to a resolution, they're like, I've had enough. So how could we change that narrative for the type 9s? I need some time to reflect and to understand. I love that statement for a 9. My husband's a type 9, and it just reminds me to give him space to reflect and understand so that we can come to a resolution together, to be in the desired harmony of speaking up for themselves and saying, I just need some time to reflect and understand, instead of, I've had enough, I'm done, I'm walking away. And for the type 1s that bring us so much goodness, when they're healthy, they have such a strong sense of right and wrong and the desire to live in the right way and improve the world. But when it gets super frustrating for them and they get to that, I've had enough, they might say, I believe there's a better way that we could approach this. When I hear that sentence, I just hear the type 1s taking a breath and saying, I believe there's a better way that we could approach this. And that feels good to them because they're leaning into creating that goodness that they bring to the world, but they're not shutting down. So you hear, as we change the narrative, as we shift from I've had enough in these body spaces that feel so much in their gut and their body that they just stop the movement, you hear being very open-handed and open-hearted and opening their mind. I believe there's a better way, says the 1. Let's discuss this openly and find a solution, says the 8. And the type 9 saying, I need some time to reflect and understand. The 9 brings peace, the 1 brings goodness, and the 8 brings power. And we need all of those things when they're open and in that place. So that's our gut type and how they might change the narrative. Let's look at also our head types. How might they change their narrative? Now, remember, when I work with the Enneagram, I always talk about it through this lens of the harmony triads. And some people study differently, but I love the harmony because it gives us that idea that we're connected to all 3 centers. I believe by God's design, as a person of faith, we have all 3 of these centers. We live heavily out of one, but we connect to all 3. So as we move into the head, the 8, the 5, and the 2 connect together, the 8 being the body, the 5 being the head, and the 2 being the heart. The type 5 in this head space, these people are really looking to have a healthy expression that comes from a place of trust, not only in themselves, but in others. The 5, the 6, the 7 that are in this headspace, they're leaning in. I need security. I need safety. For all 3 of the head types, what's going on for them is a statement many times of, I won't have enough. I won't have enough information, is what the type 5 is thinking. I need more wisdom, more knowledge. That's what they bring us, wisdom. Instead of shutting down with the statement and closing off, they might say something like, how can I gather more information and resources to ensure I'm prepared? How can I take action through my body to gather more? And that will assure me in a loving way that I'm prepared. So instead of, I won't have enough, how can I gather more information and resources to ensure, give me that safety that I'm prepared? That's being a healthy 5 and not being overwhelmed by the demands of the world. For the 6, this loyalty and faithfulness that they bring to the world, the beautiful part of devotion, they can feel very responsible and reliable. They often fear being without that support. So instead of saying, I won't have enough connection, I won't have enough support and guidance, How about if they change the narrative to an openness of, I trust my network, I trust my friends, I trust my coworkers, whatever it might be. I trust my network and abilities to navigate this situation. In other words, I have the support I need. For the 5s, it's about I have the resources, or I can gather those resources. For the 6, it's leaning into the trust of the friends, the network. I have what I need to navigate this situation. Now, the 7, also in this head type, overthinking, overgoing in the head, but a healthy 7 that's joyful and multi-talented, their fear of being trapped in pain is what keeps them thinking. I'm either trapped in pain or I feel like I've been deprived. So instead of saying I won't have enough, how about I appreciate what I have and I find creative solutions when needed? Now, I want to tell a story from these head types. I have really good friends that are head types. I have family members that operate out of the head space. And especially in this type 7, I have a really good friend that I lost about a year ago. You've heard me talk about her on the podcast. She's actually been on the podcast. Terry was a full-on type 7. Many times she would say, I want to live from the buffet of life. I don't want to be deprived of anything. She was actually in recovery. She had used that to escape her pain. But I watched her move to a very healthy place in the last 10 years of her life to say, I appreciate what I have. And it wasn't a lot because she had lost a lot of things in her life, but she appreciated and worked daily to appreciate what she have and find creative solutions to have what she needed, and learned to live from a place of joy, fulfillment, and experiences in life because she stopped the narrative of, I won't have enough. Now, was it daily? Absolutely. For all of us, changing the narrative is a daily thing. Whether that narrative is the head narrative of I won't have enough, or the body narrative of I've had enough, or the heart narrative of I'm not enough. Those are all the narratives that are going on that unfortunately our brain wants to tell us out of almost that flight, fight, and freeze place that we have, keeping us safe. So let's look at the heart center. The heart centers of the 2s, the 3s, and the 4s. Remember, we're all connected. 852-369-741. Those are the harmonies, head, heart, and body. And when we look at the head types and we look at the narrative that they're having of I'm not enough, comes from shame. It comes from a place of almost sorrow and guilt. How does the type 2 who brings love into the world say, I'm not loving enough, I'm not enough? How can they change the narrative and open their hands to say, I offer love and support in my unique way? I was with a 2 today in a workshop and a retreat that I was leading, and to watch her lean into, I can be a beautiful, healthy 2 who has my boundaries and loves and supports in my own unique way. And I'm very aware of where I need to say my yeses and my nos. Because one of the things that stood out for her in some training that we have done is every time I say a yes, and I say, I'm not enough, so I'm going to say yes, I actually am saying no to something else. And that no might be the most important thing. I said yes once too often because I felt like I wasn't enough. But how can a 2 lean in and say, I offer love and support in my own unique way, and what I do is enough? And for the type 3, which if you've listened to me talk about the Enneagram, you know this is my home type, brings effectiveness. The type 3 is amazing at their effectiveness, but when they're healthy, they're excelling and driven and oriented towards success. They want to be affirmed and can often feel and tell themselves that I'm not doing enough. I'm not enough. But what if very open-handedly they say, I value my efforts and accomplishments. I'm always growing. I'm always on the journey. I'm never going to be enough. And can I say that in a positive way? I value my efforts. I value what I did today. When I lay my head down on the pillow, it was enough because I'm always growing. Feeling that growth opportunity instead of shaming ourselves too, I'm not enough. And lastly, the type 4, who brings us creativity and is an individual and loves that introspective, unique expression that they have. And many times can get way down in the depth of their feelings to say, I'm not enough. No matter what I do, I'm not enough. How about them leaning in with open hands, open heart, open mind, open body to say, I embrace my unique qualities, and I know that I have a special place in the world. I know that I am doing exactly what God designed for me to do. Being special is actually how God sees you. So when heart types move into this healthy, deep understanding and their worth, this self-awareness and compassion allows them to internalize the truth that they are enough. Just like moving into the statements for the head type. If you hang around with me long enough, listen to the podcast long enough, read the book, all the different content that we have out there here at the Real Life Process, you will hear me talk about internal and external. When my internal congruency of who I am aligns with my external doing, that's when I know that I'm living from rest, not rush. What I'm allowing my brain to tell myself is a part of that journey. You may want to go back and re-listen to this podcast and just fast forward right to your home types, right to your center, whether you feel like you resonate out of the head center, the body center, or the heart center. And maybe exploring the Enneagram, this is the first time you've ever heard some of this language. That's okay. We have plenty of resources for you at thereallifeprocess.com. If you click on the podcast, you can get a free typing guide and read more about the Enneagram and discover it a little bit more and really change that narrative that's in your head, the crazy tape that plays sometimes over and over. Sometimes we can get stuck in it throughout the day. Practicing to take a pause and a breath to say, not today. Today, I'm going to change the narrative and move away from I'm not enough. I've had enough. Those types of statements won't really reframe that into a growing mindset. And if you decide that you'd like to dive in a little bit deeper, you can check out some places on our website, maybe even something like this is a tool that you've been looking for. I'd like to use some tools like this, either to learn how to work with some tools to help people rewrite their stories and live from a place of rest, not rush. And those are the kind of tools and the kind of certifications, the kind of communities that we build here at the Real Life Process. So if you haven't been hanging around with us or you're getting reacquainted, thanks for listening in. Thanks for diving with me into this idea of changing the narrative that's in your head. One of the ways that I have to work at changing the narrative is actually to slow myself down. And one of the ways that I do that is each and every day, I try to capture a moment that has been the highlight moment, the extraordinary moment of the day. And I actually do that on a social media post on Facebook. If you'd love to follow me, come on over and follow me personally at Teresa McCloy. I also share a lot of those on Instagram. You can find me there as well and find out more about the Real Life Process through some of those things as well. I post that every day to remind me that there's been something extraordinary in the day that I want to remember. I want to give a nod to. I want to be grateful for. Because every ordinary day does have an extraordinary moment We just have to look for them. So I hope you'll look for yours today. Check out more in our show notes of some different links and resources that we have to our upcoming certification cohort. Thanks for joining us on the Doing What Matters podcast. We'll be back next week with more conversation about living our lives from a place of rest and not from rush. Have a great week, everyone.